Welcome to Successfully Sustainable, the podcast all about attainable, maintainable sustainability, brought to you by our friends at Herbalist and Apothecary. Welcome to this special episode of Successfully Sustainable. I'm your host, Brad Farrell, and want to start off with a few T's and C's and apologies. So obviously, once again, we're not in our usual studio. That is for a couple of reasons. One main reason, I'm currently isolating because I've got COVID, so that's cool. But we made a plan to record remotely for this episode, and the timing was kind of ripe or at least it's worked out nicely anyways for what I want to talk about today. Unfortunately, we don't have a guest today who is considerably more educated in some field or another than myself, so you'll just have to deal with me, so my apologies in advance. But yeah, today we're going to be talking about climate change, which I guess is kind of the core reason for this podcast in and of itself. Again, apologies for any bird noises or whatever. Hopefully they help you feel more connected to nature. I want to start off by making a few things clear. As you can see, I'm an able-bodied, you couldn't see this part, but cis-het white man, born into a middle-class household, and therefore whatever opinions I have and share on this podcast obviously come from a place of privilege, and whilst I try to be as aware of that and as intersectional as possible in my commentary, I just won't get it right all the time, and for that I'm sorry in advance. In saying that, I'm also far from perfect, and nobody's perfect, and I'm one of those people, so I will get things wrong, and it's important to acknowledge that. I'm really not coming into this podcast ever, but particularly this one, from a place of, moral high ground or holier than thou-ness. I'm just trying to share some things that I've learnt in a way that hopefully is fairly enjoyable and consumable, and that appeals to as many people as possible. If you take issue with any of the things I say in this podcast or in any other ones, and you're welcome to, obviously, I'm really willing to engage with that and take that on. Like I said, I very much acknowledge that I'm far from perfect and will make mistakes and all of that, but it's not intentional, and I'm not coming into this with the intent to convey any incorrect information or offend anyone in any way. But if you do feel that I've done that, please engage with me on it. My only request is that you do it respectfully and with respect to the fact that I am human and I will make mistakes. And it's not my intent. But let's get into the meat of things. Before I became vegetarian in early 2019, I was super resistant to the idea. Not because, obviously, I had any argument against the eco-friendliness or ultimately the facts of, how much better going vegetarian or vegan would be for the environment, but because I felt that the pressure imposed by certain members of those communities who I was exposed to at the time, through the media and personal interactions and all of that, was like aggressive and kind of based on kind of imposing this guilt and anger and, you're bad if you don't do this. And I fundamentally didn't want to be associated with a community that, in my opinion at the time, I associated with kind of using guilt and aggression to pressure and bully other people into making decisions. Because I didn't think that was the right way to go about it, which I guess is where we find ourselves here with this podcast. Trying to make sustainability accessible and promote attainable, maintainable sustainability, because I think it's really important to promote that, to promote things that people can do fairly simply on a day-to-day basis that they can incorporate into their routines and into their lives that just helps make Earth a bit of a better place, and make it accessible to everybody. I think it's really important to detach sustainability as a concept from any notion of activism or identification with any particular group or ideology, because in my opinion, being sustainable and taking more sustainable actions, I think it's really important to detach sustainability from any notion of activism or identification with a particular group or specific ideology. Because to me, being sustainable should have nothing to do with anything other than the core belief that the human race needs to survive past the turn of the century. And we need to do so on this beautiful planet that we call home, because as of yet, it's the only planet that we know that can sustain life. And I don't think it should have anything to do, it should have to do with any other kind of identification or belief other than that. This podcast aims to share relevant information that's applicable about sustainability, that's relevant to everybody, without passing judgment, because I think that's really important, so that we can all unite behind what I believe is a truly common cause, regardless of our differences. I'm not perfect. I'm not an activist. I'm just a human being with a kind of complex combination of both selfish and altruistic motives that culminate ultimately in kind of a deep-seated need to try and help spread information to help other people like myself understand the gravity of the situation we find ourselves in, and as many easy and simple things that we can do to change that situation and share that information. On Monday the 9th of August, today is Sunday the I Don't Knowth, the 15th of August, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, which is a United Nations body, released their 6th assessment report on climate change. It's called AR6. We'll link it in the bio. The United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres called this report a code red for humanity, which is incredibly strong language, and the UN are not wont to use such kind of strong language unless there is real need for it. What this report, amongst many kind of terrifying and deeply worrying findings, finds, it's a collective report from over 150 top scientists associated with hundreds of governments all across the world, all united in trying to provide accurate, up-to-date data on the state of climate change on Earth. And among its core findings, probably the most pertinent is that if nothing changes in the way that we consume and emit carbon dioxide and other related pollutants into the atmosphere, we will hit that 1.5 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial times by the end of this decade, not by the end of the century like it was a decade or so ago, not by 2050 like it was with the last report, by the end of this decade, which will have devastating consequences for everyone all over the world, no matter how rich you are, no matter how powerful you think you are. Mother Nature's going to fight back, and she's going to win. Because we've been mistreating her for centuries now. According to the World Meteorological Organization, which was one of the founders of the IPCC, existing temperature increases can already be linked, and we know this, to devastating natural disasters happening right now. For example, fires in North America that are being stoked by heat and droughts, which is sending clouds of smoke across the Atlantic. We've recently seen the devastating fires in Turkey and Greece, amid this intense heat wave in the Mediterranean. Even Siberia which is a region traditionally associated with permafrost, has once again seen massive wildfires after exceptional heat waves, fires, and low Arctic sea ice in 2020. So we're already seeing the negative consequences of what's about 1.1 degrees above pre-industrial times at this present moment. And once we hit 1.5 degrees, there's certain things that we simply can't take back. And there will be consequences that we will not be able to reverse. So what's the point of this episode? Firstly, it's not to play holier than thou. I'm not. I'll freely admit I'm bad about a lot of this stuff. And it's important to admit that, and it's important to say that I can be a participant in these things and also be trying to combat them in much the same way that one can be complicit in various other systems of oppression or marginalization, whilst also trying to fight against them. And it's also not to dump a whole bunch of scary facts on your head and guilt trip you with how bad you are for the planet, because I think we're all kind of desensitized to that kind of stuff now anyways, and we need to change the angle. Ultimately, the point of this episode is to try and contextualize the issue and try and tell you some ways that you can make a difference, and to try to impress on you how important it is for you to take action and how important your small actions are and how big a difference they can make. Because they are so important and they can make a huge difference. So please, please listen to these things. And if you don't agree with me, find other people. There's other people with better ideas. Go listen to them. But there's a couple here and they might be helpful. Before we jump into the real crux of this topic, we just wanted to take a second to tell you about Ether, Herbalist, and Apothecary. As we move to push sustainability across the board, it's really important for us to work with and support local companies that do the same. Ether offer the widest variety of herbal and mushroom medicines in South Africa, with a wide variety of uses, from improving your immune system and cognitive health to addressing many common ailments and more. From their largely locally sourced and totally vegan ingredients, to their ethical and chemical-grade production processes, to their work to educate people around the use of natural remedies, Ether represent exactly the kind of brand that we're proud to support. They've been kind enough to give our listeners 15% off all products on their website. So if you'd like to try out some natural medicines, as well as support the show, use the code SUCCESSUSTAIN15 at checkout on their website etherherbalistapothecary.com or follow the link in our bio. Back to the episode. I mean, what's the cause of this massive increase of, in carbon emissions? And we all know this, but for those that don't, according to an Oxfam policy paper on confronting carbon inequality written by Tim Gore, the richest 1% of people on this planet were responsible for 15% of emissions added to the atmosphere between 1990 and 2015. That's more than all the citizens of the EU and more than twice that of the poorest half of humanity, who emitted about 7% of emissions. The richest 10% accounted for over 50% of emissions in that time. From another perspective, according to an article by The Guardian published based on an analysis from the Climate Accountability Institute in 2019, so it is slightly out of date, 20 companies, largely fossil fuel companies, were responsible for at least 35% of all energy-related carbon dioxide and methane emissions since 1965. And that's to kind of say that on one hand, it's not you driving your car, although that's a whole separate debate. It's not individuals that are contributing directly the lion's share of carbon emissions. There are several companies where there is a ton of money and propaganda involved that contribute hugely towards the desecration of our planet. for the enrichment of a tiny, tiny fraction of human beings. And it's worth mentioning that it's well documented that these organizations, these fossil fuel companies, have known exactly of the devastating consequences of the way that they have been pillaging our natural resources to enrich themselves, and they've known about the consequences of these actions for the planet and for climate change and for our future since arguably middle of last century, the 50s, 60s, and they just haven't done anything about it. They don't care about us. They don't care about the future. They fundamentally care about the money. And so the money is something very important to get into, and we will in a little bit. With all that in mind, it's worth differentiating as well between reasons and justification, because I think it's a very important difference. Because, like I said, I mean, these 20 companies that contribute the most to emissions, there's lots of practical and systemic reasons that we can't control, which can prevent us from engaging in certain more sustainable behaviors. And we'll get into some examples. That being said, it's really important, I think, that we don't let these valid reasons that limit what we can do become justifications for our own laziness in taking actions to change the things that we can control. And, don't use those valid reasons as excuses for not doing our best to minimize the impact of those things that we can't control. For example, let's take petrol cars versus electrical cars in South Africa. Ignoring the various arguments for how one gets that electricity, let's say hypothetically we could get it from renewable sources and not from burning coal. But in South Africa, because of the stability of our electrical grid, our infrastructure challenges, it's just not practical. I mean, supply being a huge one. It's not practical for most of us, the vast majority of citizens, to drive an electric car. I mean, it's not practical for the majority of our citizens to have a car. But having an electrical car is effectively impossible. So, therefore there is a reason for you to continue to use your petrol car when necessary. But that reason mustn't become a justification or an excuse for the abject misuse of that petrol resource. And where we find the middle ground in that is saying, okay, I do need to take a car for my commute to work, but where possible, trying to carpool in that, or shorten your commute in one way or another, or use public transport to get to university. Use public transport anyways, although the state of our public transport is a separate issue. The reason is valid, but don't let it become a justification for laziness. And again, I'm guilty of doing that myself. I'm not trying to be some pariah, but it's important to be thinking about it. For another example, let's take plant-based eating. Like I said, I'm vegetarian. Then getting closer to truly plant-based or vegan. But there are several factors which make a plant-based eating lifestyle just not practical for people, not viable, not doable at all. Financial, socioeconomic, physiological, all of which are valid reasons for not being able to kind of instantly switch over to veganism in the interests of the planet. But they shouldn't be used as a justification or an excuse for ignoring the fact that factory farming of meat is detrimental to the planet. 100% fact. The animal ethics is a whole separate argument, but I'm not even touching on that here. And the overconsumption of meat is not how we were, Yes, we are omnivores, and yes, our bodies are used to meat, but we developed our omnivorous tendencies when we were having meat maybe once or twice a week or a month, not twice a day. And so it's important to not use the physiological or socio-economical or financial reasons for not being able to completely make that switch as an excuse to be lazy and just an excuse to continue to overconsume and gluttonously consume unethically sourced animal products. It's not a polar issue. There's nuance to it, and it's important to acknowledge that nuance and not allow yourself to polarize it. Whilst this climate crisis will undoubtedly affect us all differently, at least initially, and initially will 100% affect the poor and marginalized, who, if you remember, contribute the least to our carbon emissions. It'll affect them much more than it will the rich and privileged. If we don't do anything about it, that initial difference will soon abate, and it will be the great equalizer of our time. And if we really don't do anything about it soon enough, and that soon enough is very soon, it will be the great equalizer of all time for the human race. And I don't feel like we're addressing that with enough urgency. This is a unique situation in, activism around a particular social issue, or I think so anyways, because to varying degrees we're all perpetrators, victims, and bystanders. If the temperature rises above that 1.5 degrees above pre-industrial times and further, it hits 2 degrees, the consequences become devastating. The higher it gets, it becomes completely impractical for life as we know it, beyond just human life. If that happens, we will all suffer to a degree as yet unprecedented in recorded history, which makes us all victims. We're all, to varying degrees again, but victims of it now. People are being displaced by fires. People are getting killed by increasing floods and increasing severity of hurricanes and typhoons and cyclones and tropical storms and earth slides. And, over time, we will all become victims to those same things. We're all perpetrators by virtue of our everyday actions. Whilst obviously, again, a huge amount of carbon emissions can be traced back to a select few companies who are really just destroying the planet for their own enrichment, and I don't, denigrate that at all. But we all still contribute as well, and we are all still thus perpetrators. When the cocoa and the chocolate you buy isn't Rainforest Alliance certified, you're contributing to unsustainable deforestation. When the pension fund or index fund that you pay into or invest in holds shares in fossil fuel companies, you are paying for those companies to continue to burn our planet for the enrichment of the few. And again, this isn't to guilt trip people. It's to make us all a bit more aware of quite how deeply this system of destroying our planet has become ingrained in everything we do. That the majority of pension funds, the majority of index funds hold stocks in fossil fuel companies. And I'm not trying to say that makes you evil or anything, obviously not, but it's to try and highlight how we are all perpetrators and contributors to making this problem worse in our everyday lives if we're not being more and more conscious about it. There are infinite ways in which we perpetrate the climate change problem in our everyday lives, and it's, we're unwilling participants largely in these systems, and often unknowing participants, but participants nonetheless. And finally, as we continue to stay silent and continue to not hold these companies and organizations and countries who contribute the most to our carbon emissions accountable, we're bystanders. And the bystanders of the worst events in human history are by no means, protected from the judgment of future generations. And we need to realize that our actions today are going to be judged, hopefully are going to be able to be judged by future generations. And hopefully they'll see that we stopped being bystanders and perpetrators and started trying to be the people who changed the systems. We need to make this problem a part of our global conversation so that it gets addressed with the level of urgency that it deserves. My top tips. Obviously, in all our previous episodes, we let our lovely guests give their top tips for simple, implementable things that people can do to make their lives a little bit more sustainable. And that's, again, because I really want this podcast to promote practical, simple things that people can do that come from a wide range of sources that, help everyone find what is sustainable for them, because it's not the same. It's not the same for everybody. Everyone has a different situation and everyone has different things that they can do to make change. And I just want to help share as many different ideas for that as possible. So, kind of collated from many of the incredible guests we've had so far and will continue to have on this show, I've got a few of my top tips as well, and I hope they can be helpful to you. The first one is try moving towards plant-based eating. Like I said, I'm not saying like become vegan tomorrow, because that's hard as hell. I know that it can be hard. I know that being vegetarian can be hard. I know that it can seem scary and, it can feel like you don't know what you're getting into or how to do it. And I also felt that. And I was lucky enough to even have a sister who'd been vegetarian for a couple of years before, who was a massive, massive help in my journey. And I don't kind of discount that. But for me, it's starting with small steps, and then the next steps come a lot easier. Try Meat-Free Monday. It's, so many people around the world do it. And to take a kind of very simplistic analysis of that impact of doing Meat-Free Monday, if half the current meat-eating population started doing Meat-Free Mondays, that would decrease demand for meat by over 7%. That's a significant demand decrease, especially across a whole sector. And money talks, like we said in the very beginning. Money is what will change the opinions of these organizations. Money is what holds them accountable. They're so core to the way that our society functions, or at least we and they think they are, that unless we apply economic pressure, the change isn't going to come. So we need to, especially those of us that are financially able, have to start turning those pressure wheels on the companies that are contributing the most. Money talks. So a decrease of over 7% in demand for meat-free products naturally results in an increase in a demand for meat alternatives, plant-based meat alternatives, which allows for the producers of those alternatives to benefit further from economies of scale, which is, in layman's terms, the concept that, the more you're producing, the cheaper the production of each one gets, and therefore the price of each one goes down. It also increases the market incentive for new people to enter that market and new producers of plant-based foods to enter the market, which means that the price will go down further and the variety will be more and the quality of those alternatives will get higher. And then it becomes its own virtuous cycle, whereby the price is going down, the quality of alternatives is going up, the variety of alternatives is going up, and we're slowly reducing the negative impact of the factory farming of animal products. We've had a good few incredible chefs and restaurateurs on the show so far. A huge shout out to Tash from Nourished and to Jay from The Kind Kitchen, both of whom are Cape Townian chefs and restaurateurs who are doing incredible work to further to offer vegan and plant-based alternatives and really, really yummy, healthy, incredible food. Who have given their own tips and tricks of, things that you can do with different ingredients and recipes and substitutes. So I would really recommend going to watch those episodes, but if you don't feel like watching or listening to them, we post their tips and tricks on our Instagram, and you can go find them there. Also go to their restaurants because they're good as hell. Give it a Google. There's so many recipes now for so many different alternatives that cater to your tastes and your preferences. I promise going plant-based is easier and tastier than you think. You just have to take those first steps and forgive yourself. It's really important to be able to be bad at it and to make mistakes and to not think that makes you a bad person or a bad vegetarian or anything. I think let yourself make those mistakes. If it's 3 days a week and then it's 5 days a week and then it's 4 days a week and then it's 6 days, that's cool. It's progress and you're making the effort. Yeah, be forgiving of your own mistakes and your human fallibility in the actions that you take to try and prevent climate change. So that you don't allow an unattainable standard of perfection prevent you from imperfect motion, because I think that's so much more important. Rather pursue that imperfect motion where you're going forward and making change over time than, trying to do something really hard for you that you then fail at and feel horrible about, and then you binge meat and then you try be vegan again. It's not just try and do that. Take small actions to make this a part of the broader conversation. I think that's one of the powers of the individual is to, the power of the individual is to find other individuals who share the same belief and want to do the same things. And, we need to make this a bigger part of our cultural conversation as a human race and as a society. With the 2021 United Nations Climate Change Conference, also known as COP26, coming up in early November this year, we as the public need to make our voices heard to our elected representatives who are representing us there. That radical change needs to come, and it needs to come immediately, and it's going to be hard, but it needs to happen now. You can sign petitions to your government representatives. We'll try collect a whole bunch and put them in the links in the episode bio. Writing letters to your media houses just to ask them to increase the emphasis of coverage on climate change and get your friends to do it. Share posts and resources and content that is trying to educate people on climate change to your social media. If you don't know what to share, we've got a whole bunch of stuff that you can share. But seriously, like we do, and we're trying to make it as accessible and non-judgmental and attainable as possible. And we really want more and more people to be a part of this conversation and hearing from the incredible activists and business people and educators that we're going to have had on and are continuing to try and get onto the show to share their wisdom and knowledge with us. These small actions do make so much more of a difference than you think, and we need to just have routine actions that we take as a part of our everyday lives that reduce our negative impact on the planet. And that also provide market pressure to the corporations that are destroying the planet to change their ways. You know, yeah, it's doing whatever small actions make sense for you in your particular context that are attainable for you. Make them a part of your routine so that these behaviors aren't short-lived, that, you know, they're maintainable parts of your life that you can just continue with in perpetuity, that almost just become, you know, non-events. And as each one becomes a part of your life, try add something else that wasn't before, and just integrate these behaviors slowly over time. It's through imperfect small steps of individuals permeating across the collective that we'll be able to change the cultural narrative. And that, to me, is a super easy way for us all to help and contribute. My last tip, I guess, is that there's no perfect or right way to be sustainable. You know, veganism doesn't work for so many people because at this point of the price of meat alternatives. Now, there's plenty of ways to be vegan without using meat alternatives, but that relies on a certain level of education. You know, availability of resources, knowledge of how to cook with certain things. There's socioeconomic factors. There's all sorts of things, and it's naive to say, oh, veganism is, you know, everyone should be vegan. There's too much nuance to it to give that kind of a black and white statement. But so yeah, don't hold yourself to a standard set by somebody else who doesn't understand your context. Hold yourself to a standard that you've set based on your own knowledge of your context. And like I said, that's the difference between reasons and justification. You know what is practically impossible for you and practically not viable for you, and you know what things you could do but you just aren't disciplining yourself enough to do, or are just being lazy. And again, I'm not saying this to call you out and be like, oh, well, and I'm perfect. Like, I do that shit as well regularly, you know, but it's kind of having a shared accountability and a shared kind of awareness of our imperfections, and just trying to be better on a daily basis. Try and take a positive step forward every day in your sustainability, and I think soon you'll find yourself happier and healthier than you've been in your life. And, you know, you'll be contributing to the ongoing health of our planet and the perpetuation of the human race into the future. That's it from me for this episode of Successfully Sustainable. I sincerely hope you've taken something from it. I hope that it's been pertinent and relevant, and you've learned something, and that you'll share this. Please, please, please share this. Again, I don't think I'm perfect. I don't think what I'm saying is perfect, but I do think that what I'm saying should be heard by more people, and what various other media contributors are saying should be heard. So if you don't want to share this, share something else. Please, 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 please share something else, because the situation is so dire that if we don't make change soon enough and push for faster, better, more effective change, you know, we are going to endure things and then not endure them that we've never had to face as a species, as a planet. And, you know, yeah, it's a code red for humanity, and we need to treat it as such. And if you're going about your everyday life after listening to this, or you don't, you know, you're not sharing this kind of stuff, and I'm not saying all the time, we all have other stuff to do in our lives, and I acknowledge that, but, you know, if we don't do something, your everyday life's not going to be your everyday life for very long. But there is hope, and we can still turn it around. We just all need to do our part. Thank you for listening to this episode of Successfully Sustainable. We'll be back next week with another guest, which we're super excited about. And then either that one or the next one will be the last episode of the season. So we'll take a little break and then come back to you stronger and better than ever before. I've been your host, Brad Farrell. This has been a special episode of Successfully Sustainable. Thank you so much for listening. Like it, subscribe, rate us, do all those good things. Please, please, please share this episode with your friends, with your mom, your granny, your whatever, people who do believe in climate change, people who don't. This podcast is supposed to be for everyone. There's no negative consequence to learning to live our lives individually and collectively in a more sustainable and ecologically conscious way. There is no negative consequence to that. At bare minimum, it incentivizes a economic and technological revolution, which will be a fundamental evolution in the way that the human race interacts with its natural resources and the planet. At best saves us from the worst natural events that we've ever encountered. Bye-bye.
Remember to use the code SUCCESSUSTAIN15 for 15% off all products on etherherbalistapothecary.com, and a huge thanks to Ether once again for supporting the show. Thank you for listening to this episode of Successfully Sustainable. We'll see you again next Monday.